Good evening and welcome to On the Campaign Trail. It is 5 days to Election Day. 2 days ago, the last pre election survey of Pulse Asia, the only polling organization active in 2022 that makes its results and its data publicly available, was released. It seemed to show, for the second time since the official election period started, what looks like a static presidential race. And yet, on the ground, this election feels anything but static. What gives? Since November, we have tried to make sense of the 2022 elections in the belief that the democratic project is in danger and that it cannot be elections as usual. Tonight, we reconsider the role and nature of the surveys we have come to depend on, and then explore the possibilities and limitations of big data, in particular, of social data. In a very real sense, social data, data we generate through our use of social media, proves our hashtag we decide. I am John Nery, and you are on the campaign trail. I share the view that Pulse Asia and social weather stations are professionally run, their surveys scientifically sound, and their commitment to democracy a matter of public record. But like other professional, scientific, democratic institutions, their work has its limits and its mistakes too. In the last few days, my colleague, the economist JC Punongbayan, has helped many of us understand how the limits of the latest Pulse Asia survey can skew the picture. He has kindly agreed to join us tonight. And joining us from Singapore are two big data specialists, Wilson Chua and Roger Du. Wilson and Roger have been among the data scientists leading the charge to make us develop a familiarity with and an appreciation for what we can learn from social data, such as Google Trends. JC, Wilson, Roger, welcome to the program.
Good evening, John.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. Let me start with a question for Dr. JC. So there's been renewed interest in and scrutiny of Pulse Asia, especially its latest survey. Can you give this latest bout of scrutiny forces people to take a look at the methodologies that Pulse Asia is using. Can you give us an idea of maybe the problems, the limits of Pulse Asia polling?
Thank you, John. So, as reported in media, Pulse Asia came out with its latest survey results. They found that as of April 21, Marcos Jr. still enjoys a significant lead at 56%, while Vice President Leni Robredo got 23%. This got many people thinking, because there seems to be a disconnect between what's happening on the ground. For example, we see in media the huge rallies in support of Vice President Leni Robredo, but mere days from election day, the numbers in the surveys by Pulse Asia do not seem to budge. And Dr. Romulo Virola, former head of the NSCD, one of the agencies that were subsumed into the what we now call the Philippine Statistics Authority, he has been posting on Facebook some analysis using data. And for example, he showed some limitations of the sampling of Pulse Asia, because whereas we know for a fact that they have 2,400 respondents, and statistically, this is more than enough to get a feel for what the Filipino people prefer in the upcoming elections. But he showed using some data that, for example, in previous survey rounds, for example, the one in February, socioeconomic class A and B were not at all represented. And he contrasted this with some other study commissioned by the Philippine Statistics Authority, showing that throughout the population, in fact, they number about 8.76%. So essentially, what he is saying is that the sentiments of certain demographic groups, for example, socioeconomic classes A and B, are not being captured in the Pulse Asia surveys. And aside from the socioeconomic groups, he also showed that, for example, the youth are underrepresented in the surveys of Pulse Asia, whereas those who are older are overrepresented. As well, he showed that, for example, those with higher educational attainment seem to be overrepresented as well. So this has led to a flurry of conversations on social media, casting some level of doubt on the numbers coming out of Pulse Asia. And this is significant because, of course, we, as you mentioned, they're the only survey firm that is really active in putting out the numbers. And there seems to be a potential for mind conditioning, especially near days coming into the elections. So I think that's the gist of it, John.
So, Dr. JC, it's a question of both underrepresentation in some demographics and overrepresentation in other demographic sectors. That together might be the problem. A question for both Wilson and Rodzer. In what way is social data different from these random sample scientific surveys that Pulse Asia runs?
Roger, would you like to take that?
Sure. Let me take your crack at it first. So first, so survey is a lagging indicator because we know it takes time to prepare and it takes time to release. So the survey you're looking at is probably from 2-3 weeks ago. That's a really good tool if you're studying a very stable opinion, such as abortion in the US, national defense, or government performance. So survey is a great tool for stable, long-term attitude. For really erratic campaign, it's a really bad tool because it's very slow. And social intelligence is a leading indicator because we are observing the entirety of the conversation, but we're not asking questions. So we are observing more natural behavior. We're looking at long-term attitude about specific issue, but because we're 2 hours behind on anything people post, we have a real-time analysis of the situation. So that's where that's the qualitative one. The interesting thing is sampling. Dr. JC already talked about sampling. Here's the perspective. Most survey in the Philippines are no more than 3,500 respondents. Yet, Philippines has over 42,000 barangay. How many of the 25,000 barangay are included in a sampling of 3,500 respondents? That's because they already made a pre-commitment to the barangay selection. So that's a very interesting thing. For social media, I just ran a search for information about Lenny on attitude for the last 7 days. In 7 days, we have 35 million data points to calculate attitude, not just for one candidate. So, theoretical 1 week analysis about the candidate, we can have over 90 million data points. So, do you believe 90 million data point in 7 days is a better representation of Philippines' attitude, or 3,500 responded 3 weeks ago? So one of the challenges is how do you reconcile speed with a precision question? And we know social media is overly sensitive to fast-moving events. So we are looking at two different tools that has two different uses. And to say one tool is dominating over the other in our situation, it's a statistical hubris I think nobody should make.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for talking about in terms of these two tools. I wanted to ask Wilson. We're not saying that we shouldn't pay attention to the scientific surveys, right? I mean,
Nope,
that's not what
nope.
you're
Yeah.
saying. But at the,
Mhm.
so I wanna point out that at least in the Philippine experience, Pulse Asia and social weather stations have been quite precise as far as predictions are concerned. Um, in what way is social data? How in what way does social data complement the track record of survey organizations like Pulse Asia?
Well, for the February timeframe, we actually looked at the survey results for Okta and Pulse Asia, and we superimposed that on what the social engagement scores are as we computed them. So let me
Mhm.
explain the chart a bit, right? On the x-axis, which is the horizontal, you have the dates, February 1 all the way to March 3. And then each of those lines represent the cumulative total of the engagement score for each of the five leading candidates, right? The red one, the dark red, is for BBM. The pink one is for VP Lenny. So you see two lines crisscrossing each other. Let me
Mhm.
highlight crisscrossing each other. Over
Mhm.
that period and the period in April, we see the leads flip from one candidate to the other, which signifies a very close fight, not like what the surveys are saying. However, let me again point your attention to Okta. During the period that Okta conducted their survey, they showed that BBM is ahead. Social engagement data also agrees with them. BBM was ahead during the period where you conducted your survey. In terms of Pulse Asia, again, it's the same thing directionally. This is what Rogers' term, I'll borrow Rogers' term, directionally aligned. Pulse Asia shows that during the period February 18 to February 23, PBM was ahead. Where we differ is in the percentage gap. So we took a slice on the February 18 and took a look at the social engagement scores for that date among the five candidates. And what did we see? We see that BBM's lead is actually around 5% and not the touted 30 to 40 or 50 percentage points, right? So that
Mhm.
is during February 1 to March 2. Now, let me show you what's happening more recently. So this is a more updated chart showing the same cumulative running totals for social engagement scores. You will see that over this period that we've been tracking, the lines have overlapped each other, indicating really a close fight.
Mhm.
And here, this is end of April. End of April, we note this gap over here. We measure this
Mhm.
gap. VP Lenny has a slight lead of 44.91% over 40.83%, which is around 4.08%, which is very slim. And that small margin says to us that the fight is not yet over. The last 14 or however number of days left is still
Mhm.
critical to both of the campaigns. And so this is where we digress with Pulse Asia.
Mhm.
We like you, Roger and I have high regards for SWS, Pulse Asia, and even Okta. We know the people behind them are very professional, and so we're looking at when SWS Asia release the results, did they identify the estimated number of undecided voters? This is critical because if your survey says that, okay, this is the result of our survey, and it seems
Mhm.
everybody has already made up their mind, then there's
Mhm.
no point. There's no point campaigning. You see Roger agreeing, right? But what do we see on social media data? We see this. So let me give a brief background for the graph. So each row is one candidate. The bar in green shows the positive reactions, and then the slight red over here are the negative ones. What's interesting are the blue swing reactions.
Mhm.
So these are reactions that Roger, when I asked Roger about this chart, these are the ha ha and the wow reactions. You know, when people say ha ha, they either are for you or they're being sarcastic. Dito with the wow reaction. It could be, wow, you're so galing, or wow naman, oh, totoo ba yan? You know, so
Mhm.
these are swing votes. Roger, would you like to add something more before we show the coup de grace data on
Sure.
this slide?
Just really briefly. We look at positive is very easy to determine. Negative is very easy to determine. What is in the middle, the ambiguous one, we put in the swing because these indicate these are people who are very involved in politics, yet have not made their attitude known. So these are the most likely voter. These are the people who follow politics, who are engaged in civil life, but have not clearly taken a stand. So we want to be very aware of our own hubris as data scientists. So we don't make any judgment call on these type of data. But we do know when they change, when the opinion firms up, these swing data do shrink. So based on the variation of the swing data throughout time, we can figure out where the non-committed partisan are, and they are the one that the campaign should be going after. And we also see the little red band. That's the absolute hatred you have for the other candidate. We also see that change over time, and that is also both a measurement of the campaign's communication and the opposition's suppression effort. So we look at the data with a lot of interest because they give us a really good context to make decisions about survey versus opinion research versus social intelligence.
Right. And
Yeah.
so here's what we
Wilson,
wanted. Yeah,
yeah,
go
hold
ahead,
on.
John.
Uh, Maybe we can get back to that. I think it's a very interesting slide. We need to prep the groundwork for that, so to speak. I also want to talk about comparing the predictive powers of the surveys and the social data. Can you remind us first what makes up social engagement?
Once people know how we actually compute engagement, there will be active efforts
Yeah.
aimed at gaming the computation.
Oh no,
So
no, Wilson. What if I want people to behave this way for other purposes? So we take all these
Welcome to
interaction.
Inception, ladies and
Yeah,
gentlemen.
yeah. We take the social metric like share, comment, second generation share, and we calculate this on two different ways. We either do an absolute adjustment or we do a dynamic adjustment. So for us, it's not how many posts people put out, it's how actively people actually engage with the post that matters to us. That's why sometimes a few small number of posts gets really big reaction because they have tapped into something. Another campaign put out hundreds of posts that has no reaction. So we look at these kind of engagement as a quality and as a measurement of volume and velocity.
Um, Doc JC, I want to clarify. I didn't invite you uh, here tonight to represent Pulse Asia or the survey organizations. I really found your explanation really clarifying, and I was hoping we can also continue the discussion about these surveys. As political journalists, we've been depending on these surveys for over 2 decades, and maybe it's a moment of reckoning for our profession as well. So I wanted to ask you before we ask Wilson and Roger to complete maybe the rest of the second half of their insight. Um, if you are able to fix the underrepresentation and the overrepresentation that you and Dr. Virol identified, would we be looking at a similar picture now, similar to the one that social data is putting together?
I think Dr. Verola himself has tried to do that. In his recent Facebook post, he made certain assumptions. For example, what if there was a better representation of the youth, for
Mhm.
example? But I've talked to many analysts, economists, statisticians, and I think the issue there is, for example, what if we sample more of the youth, but more of them happen to be, for example, inclined to vote BBM over Vice
Mhm.
President Robredo. So, I mean, it can go both ways, but I think
Mhm.
the general result of the Pulse Asia survey so far will hold, even if we control for or fix the sampling problems of
Mhm.
Pulse Asia. But that's for me. That's not the bigger issue here. I think the bigger issue is number one, the gap between Vice President Lenny Robredo as well as Marcos Jr. is not as large as
Mhm.
most people think. Or
Mhm.
even if it's quite large, I think the numbers that are being presented in media come from methodology that is actually replete with a number of flaws that for the longest time we have been ignoring or really don't come up in certain discussions. So I think another issue here is that you mentioned a time of reckoning. I think it's
Mhm.
a time of reckoning as well for the survey industry itself, among
Mhm.
statisticians, among those involved in surveys, that they really need to rethink the methodologies that they are using and come up with standards so that we have a better grasp of what the people really think in future surveys. So I think that's the bigger takeaway for me, John.
Thank you. Wilson and Roger, in terms of predictive power, I think that we've already discussed SWS and Pulse Asia over the last 2 decades. They've been quite accurate with their forecasts. But then social data has also had some very recent successes.
A lot.
Uh, I think in 2016, in a way, I guess this is like uh, a backtracking, right? If you look at the Google Trends for 2016, you would have been able to
Predict.
see Duterte's victory. But very recently, in the second round of the French elections, would you like to talk about that? And maybe that can also help explain the explanatory power of social data.
Yeah. So I did the study for the first round and the second round to be able to readjust my model of the Google Trends. So you
Yeah.
see, the Google Trends has several options. Like, do you select only France or do you select worldwide?
Mhm.
And do you select 30 days, 90 days, or the last 7 days? So in the first round, we just put in the normal, we just restricted the Google search results to those made from France in the last 30 days. And while it predicted Macron winning, it failed to predict Marine Le Pen's second place. That model predicted that this other guy, the
Mélenchon.
other right winger,
Mhm.
would
Yeah, the
win.
other right. Mhm.
Yeah. So, but then we having the benefit of the election result of the first runoff, it afforded us to fine tune our model
Mhm.
to set the Google Trends to worldwide because the French system allows for overseas voting
Mhm.
and only the last 7 days. So apparently, I have a slide later to show that apparently the bulk of the Google Trends searches for the second runoff for the French election happened
Mhm.
the day before the election. So
Okay, so maybe that's the right segue to that particular slide. We've been discussing that, and I'm really interested to see also how Dr. Punongbayan would respond to that. Can you bring that up again? The one that you
yeah,
started earlier.
I hope Marga can share the screen. Um, Okay, there you go. So this time we're just counting how many percent are the swing reactions. So this
Mhm.
is the Excel chart. These are the candidates. This is the positive reaction. These are the negative reactions. These are the swing reactions. You total all of them, and this 2.3 million is 39.45% of all these three numbers combined. Right? So remember,
Mhm.
39.45. It seems to tell us that there's still a sizable number of people that have yet to make up their decision. And here is the chart I'd like to show you, where we set the focus to worldwide past 7 days. This is Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen.
Mhm.
Where did the spike of searches happen? It happened the day before the election. And if you total all of this for the last 7 days, it will show that Macron will win,
Mhm.
right? And I just found out today from a Twitter done by Miss Noemi Dado that apparently the Inquirer featured the TV5 SWS survey done in 2016. It's an exit poll. And what did
Mhm.
they say? We found that 18% of those interviewed said that they made their choice only on election day itself. Another 15% decided in the last 7 days or 8 days before election. So if you combine that, that's 33%. Not very far from what we're seeing in social media's swing reaction percentage. So that's it. That's what we're saying. Like, you cannot call the election over just
Mhm.
because a survey shows that a candidate is leading. Our social data shows that it's a neck and neck fight. 5% or 4% spread, and you have a sizable number of the electorate still having
Mhm.
to decide whether or not they will vote for Lenny or BBM or the rest of the candidate. So the rest of the campaign period leading up to election day is still crucial. Roger, did I miss anything?
No, you're absolutely right. This is why in a close election, if you look at Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, the number of rally Trump did in the last 14 days of the campaign was multiple, because when the fight is this close, you need every fanatical vote. So the fact is both campaigns are still going strong. It tells me both campaign realize the race is a lot closer than the survey suggests. So it's very interesting to see what people say, and then you look at what campaign is actually doing.
Actually doing.
So those are
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah.
But is the 2022 race in fact a close race?
Based
We
on
believe
social
so.
engagement.
Yeah, we
Yes.
believe so.
Is
Right.
it
And
possible, Doc JC, that so these two different, very different tools? Is it possible that they are in fact describing the same reality? Uh, I mean, I can't think of a way in which to put them together. But is it possible, for instance, the social engagement data shows the greater volatility in the day-to-day or even hour-to-hour election-related sentiment, but that the Pulse Asia survey takes a snapshot of from a higher perspective, perhaps. I'm just trying to make sense of this. Is it possible that these two tools are in fact describing the same reality?
Mm-mm. I myself, John, am not yet decided, or I'm still trying to figure it out as well. But I wanted to ask as well our guests, because, for example, we talk about the predictive value of Google Trends in developed countries. But one of the criticisms, for example, in developing countries like the Philippines, is that certainly not all Filipinos or not most Filipinos have internet access, so that they don't really do Google searches or engage on social media. What would you say to that kind of critique when it comes to this methodology?
yeah, well, Google Trends also predicted the win by President Duterte in 2016. And let me remind you, 6 years ago, the internet penetration was even lower than what we have today. So if the predictive power held 6 years ago, where the internet penetration was lower, it should also by extension, it should also hold sway 6 years later, right? So
So
that's what.
yeah,
Yeah, Roger.
to use the data, uh, the Pulse Asia was taken 14 days ago.
Yeah.
So the theoretical underpinning, if you believe survey is powerful, is that people won't change their mind from 14 days ago until next week. So in 21 days, there's nothing anybody can do to change voters' mind. Our data respectfully disagree with that belief in human nature. Second, like I said, 3,500 respondents is the most we have seen in any given survey. I would agree survey is a good tool if the number is uh, 15,000, because that's 3,000 per class, A, B, C, D, E class. Uh, 3,500 people responded. Philippines has 42,000 barangay. So you are made a pre-commitment, a random sampling representative of all these barangay with different economic, ethnic, linguistic composition. So for us, we think social data is harder to predict because there's so much data and we're always getting more data. But we believe it is more representative than survey in situations where you're measuring fast moving attitude and issues. So, for example, the black op against VP Lenny's daughter,
Mhm.
you're never going to use a survey for that, because by the time you finish the survey, either everything's blown over or everything has blown up. So we like social data because it's more responsive and it's faster. And the law of large number even out any troll attack or prejudicial methodology. So that's where we stand. That's our theoretical bias.
Thank you, Roger. Can you give us an idea? What do the social engagement data show regarding the attacks on the president's two daughters?
The attack was fast moving, very short lived, and VP Lenny actually picked up a lot more support. So from a data point of view, it was a wonderful attack, but it benefited VP Lenny. From a campaign perspective, the attack was badly formulated. It was off. It was a attack that was never going to succeed because the message and the off-brand meaning. It was just a horribly. It was a really badly designed attack. There's a VP Lenny have other vulnerability that would have been better served if they had figured out what the attack is, but they didn't. They waste their opportunity. They made VP Lenny stronger, and the hatred towards BBM's camp actually increased. So they damaged themselves and they helped their opposition. This is because everybody assumed this come from BBM when it may not be a campaign move, it may be a vigilante or a volunteer attack, but it was it didn't achieve anything.
Wilson and Roger, I don't mean this as a disparagement. I want to. I think this is just a mere description that many people have come to embrace your work, your research, because they like the results. All right. There's an element of the affect heuristic here. I mean, it's like, okay, we like what they're saying. We don't like the
Confirmation
disclosures they're
bias.
saying.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. I'd like to ask you, and then I'd also like to ask Doc JC, how can we encourage, what kind of rigor can we encourage our audience to put into this this interaction with social data? Like, for instance, are there some measures or tests or benchmarks that you yourselves uh, check to make sure that your data is not just internally consistent, but it's actually consistent with the reality? Maybe Wilson first, and then Doc JC for his insights.
So one of the things I did was to continually harass Roger. Roger, are you sure our numbers are correct? So let me do other stuff. So what are the other stuff? So our data is primarily Facebook, right? But you and I know it's social media is not just Facebook. There's still
Mhm.
YouTube,
Mhm.
Twitter, Reddit, the
Mhm.
blogs, So I also took a look at the engagement scores on those social media, and they showed the same pattern. And we also use Google Trends to counter check ourselves, because
Mhm.
we've seen the scientific papers that cited, Google Trend accurately predicted several US elections and Canadian elections. And I myself had to create the model and test it out against the French election, right? Not to mention that Roger himself is a veteran of 90 election campaigns, and he has been using this social engagement score uh, metric of his in those 90 political campaigns. But let Roger say more about his experience.
Okay, I'll get to Roger, but Doc JC, how can we encourage more rigor in our appreciation of social data?
Yes, when it comes to these surveys that, for example, Pulse Asia and SWS come up with, we have a number of statistics that we can look at. For example, to the credit of Pulse Asia, they have been quite diligent in publishing, for example, the margin of error for the different surveys that they conduct, and that allows us, for example, to say, for example, that when it comes to the socioeconomic class A and B, there was a 40% margin of error in the latest presidential survey that they conducted. So that's quite high, and that points to the severe underrepresentation of socioeconomic class A and B, where they had 2,400 respondents, but they were only able to get six people, literally, from that socioeconomic class. The reason, for example, that it's quite difficult to gain access to these well-off people in gated subdivisions, as well as condominiums, and that's a recurring problem in many surveys conducted, not just by private entities, but also by the government itself. But aside from that, the Pulse Asia is also quite diligent in publishing its entire methodology. It's quite difficult to navigate their website, but it's there. And I mean, we have to credit them because other survey firms are not as transparent. Well, of course, many other survey firms are quite dodgy, even if you take a cursory look at their numbers. But most really don't go into publishing their methodology. So maybe one way to appreciate the statistics better is to educate people about basic statistics, basic sampling techniques, and concepts. And we really need to, I mean, that speaks to, for example, the bigger problem when it comes to numeracy, for example, in the Philippines. Uh, but yeah, there are ways to better appreciate the statistics that we see in media.
Thank you, Doc JC. Roger, can you give us an idea of which of the 90 campaigns that you've worked on or that you've monitored is closest to uh, the Philippines in 2022?
Okay, sure. I actually work. My background is actually a campaign operator, so my
Mhm.
perspective is very different. One of the interesting I see is very early on I wrote about BBM's campaign. He actually started rebranding the Marcos's legacy in 2016. So you're seeing the result of 6 years cam- of subtle campaigning. So we knew he had a large base, and the problem is he only has one message. So we know he was going to decline over time. Whereas Lenny is actually trying to build a base because she's been sidelined as a politician during her vice presidency. So her campaign was very different shape. So we knew the shape of the strategy very early on. One of the things we're seeing is really interesting is that uh, the volatility and the emotion are running so high. So we're really hoping for my friends in the Philippines to have a peaceful transition because we're seeing anger in a very unstable level. So There's a lot of campaign I can compare to, uh, and it's where democracy is not stably transferred. So that's what we're worried. And given the two candidates' history, was the last election, we know is if the vote is close, less than 3 to 4%, it's going to be a lengthy lawsuit, and that will increase the uncertainty. So we're not worried about who wins. We're worried about everything after the day after the election. That's what we're concerned about, because there's not much either campaign have left to do in the 5 day left in the campaign period. But they may leave a very, very powerful legacy of. It's a large cleanup. It may be a very large cleanup effort for somebody.
So
Roger
it's
or
like.
Wilson, can
Mhm.
you walk us through this?
So yes,
chart?
so this is to support what Roger just mentioned. We view with a slight alarm the fact that the level of hate and anger uh, exhibited by both camps are going up, and we see this as a picture of a increasingly polarized political process. If you combine that with a rather slim margin win by any of the top two,
Mhm.
we foresee a probability, a non-zero probability, that whoever loses will mount a protest. And if the protest, what Roger is saying, if the protest carries on very long, it may take to the streets. And so
And
this,
yeah,
go ahead, Roger.
and just echo what Dr. JC was saying. All these those both all the poll, both high quality and low quality, have been forecasting a large margin for BBM. So if the actual margin is very small, you are going to have lingering doubt for years that this was a fair and well executed election. And given the fact that Comelec have had security issue, we are really worried about the day after the election.
Yeah. And in the Philippines, you don't see the final result until days after the election, right?
Yeah,
So,
well, although the automated elections allow us to give to get a very good idea within a couple of days, but I guess it's really the closeness of the race. I think that will be a real problem.
if
Um,
social, again, if our social engagement score is to be
mhm,
believed, it would be a close race. But if you believe the surveys, then it's not going to be a problem. There's a
Yeah,
clear winner by a wide margin, and there
yeah,
will be a peaceful transition of power.
yeah.
well,
Sometimes, yeah,
I actually
sometimes, no, but sometimes you will believe something after you see it, and sometimes you will see it only after you believe it. That's the weird world we're currently living in right now.
Okay, I have a non-survey or non-number related conclusion here, and that is that regardless of who wins, of the outcome and of the margin of victory, it's going to be a turbulent 6 years. I think that we've seen there's a genuine effort to push back against the Marcoses and their disinformation infrastructure. And if that infrastructure helps him win, he's going to need it to stay in power. He will be there'll be a lot of factionalism in his ruling coalition. It's going to be a turbulent 6 years. We might have more need for social engagement data moving forward. Um, I wanted to ask. So I don't know if Doc JC has also seen this. In the latest Pulse Asia, for instance, there have been some findings that I find perplexing. So that like there was a big rise uh, in the previous month's survey in Vice President Robredo's ratings in Region 4A. That's Calabarzon. That's the largest, most vote-rich region in the Philippines. But in the latest, I think there's a significant double-digit drop, which yeah, this kind of volatility strikes me as well interesting. My question for you, Wilson and Roger, is there something, is there a number or a finding from your social engagement scores, uh, which you still can't get your minds around? I mean, it's like, okay, we see it, but we don't know why it's like that. Is there something
I,
similar
I, I,
to?
I think, John, we share your curiosity on this, Mark, because Roger has been saying this ever since, that looking at the numbers, whoever is a BBM voter or supporter is solid BBM, and whoever is a Lenny supporter is unlikely to change, right? So
Mhm.
the only other explanation I can see is maybe the BBM camp was able to convert the 33 or 39% undecided to vote his way. If our social data is to be believed, that there are still undecided, right? But if the prevailing thinking is that everybody has already decided, and then you see a massive drop from one camp to going to another camp, then I don't know how that happened.
One
Roger?
of the things that we're really, one of the things social data cannot, it's completely off model, is local machinery. The political alliance, we can't measure that. So you are going to see a lot of political alliance, and we know GMA is actively being part of that alliance. So these are stuff that's completely off our model. We simply cannot measure or predict. And the one piece of data I would like is the cash reserve of Philippine Bank from tomorrow until the day of the election, because that will tell me how much local machinery has influence over the vote. Because a lot of these votes are transactional. So so that's what we can't measure that, because that's completely off our model. We've been asking for Comilec for campaign expenditure for the last election, so we can measure the balance between media buy versus ground operation, because we want to be able to index measuring that. But Comilec never got back to us about that data, so we can build a model around that. We're always trying to build a better model, but we are limited by data, like everybody
Thank you.
else.
Thank you. We're running long, but allow me to ask two more questions. The last question for Doc JC. So May 9 will be a day of reckoning, not just for the Philippines, but also for the polling industry and for big data. Can you help us map out the next steps? You know, depending on the outcome, what should we do after May 9?
That's a tough question, John.
As far as the polling industry, as well as the social, data, big data uh,
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier, this is a time for the survey industry to rethink its methodologies and come up with industry wide standards. It's quite
Mhm.
unfortunate that, as a result of the criticisms, for example, by statisticians and other experts on the
Mhm.
methodologies of Pulse Asia, of course, this information goes around social media, and that kind of fuels the doubts surrounding not just Pulse Asia but also all other survey firms. So there is that kind of a cascading effect on the industry at
Mhm.
large. And for example, some people are saying that Pulse Asia has been bought, or that their survey fieldwork has been compromised because of the infiltration of partisan groups. And I'm actually quoting a response by the president of Pulse Asia, recently published, I think just minutes ago, to
Mhm.
the different criticisms. And for example, some people are pointing out the fact that the idea that it's illegal to publish these survey results. They have actually countered these baseless accusations, but I think that only tells us that the industry really needs to come together and iron out the methodologies, the doubts surrounding the methodologies that they employ. especially because of the impact that they have on our public discourse. It's quite difficult to navigate the numbers, and usually media tends to gravitate toward the publications of these survey firms. So I think on their part, they need to clean up their methodologies, if only for the benefit of the public that they survey and consume their data.
Thank you, Doc JC. Maybe we should really pay attention to that after the elections. I don't know what happened to Wilson, but Roger and Wilson, my last question for you. The familiar metaphor used to explain surveys is that it's like mixing soup, right? You stir the pot, and then you try to sip it and see whether it's perfect or not. What would be the best metaphor to explain big data or your use of social engagement data?
Sure. So for us, we think in time. So if you're running from a hurricane, do you want to get the weather report from a newspaper or from a radio? Because for a fast-moving event, survey is like a newspaper. But if you want to run away, if you want to take advantage of the storm, you need the radio. So for us, it's a matter of speed. Very stable issue, you need survey because survey can ask specific questions. Social media can't. But if you want to take advantage of opportunity or deal with threat, social media is what you use. I come from a campaign background. We don't believe the public need to be exposed to survey result because from a campaign perspective, survey is a influence operation, not a tool. Campaign use survey to make adjustment, but these are a battlefield condition, really not meant for the public to consume because each survey asks specific question, and most of the survey are there to influence the public rather than to really represent reality. So this is where, as a campaign operator, I have very specific bias about survey because I know specifically how we use them. So that's where I'm not a big fan of a survey result in the public. But that's me. I don't get to control the media, but I understand how dangerous survey can be because it sets expectation. And when the reality doesn't match that, you have very severe consequences.
Thank you. And Wilson? Oh,
I'm backstage. Okay.
There you go.
Uh, Roger and I, we're doing this as a advocacy, and again, I echo Roger's prayers that I hope there's a peaceful transition of power in this May 9 election, no matter who wins. Hello?
yes,
Yeah.
go ahead.
That's it. That's
All
it
right.
for us.
Dr. JC Punongbayan, Wilson Chua, Roger Du, thanks very much for your time and your provocative insights. Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye,
to be
and
here.
thank you for inviting us.
Political journalists like me have depended on the work of SWS and Pulse Asia for over 2 decades. The 2016 election may have been the best polled of all our elections. Pulse Asia ran weekly surveys and SWS conducted public access polls every month. This year, it's only Pulse Asia that's doing public access polling and only monthly. In that particular sense, and for understandable economic reasons, we can say that the pollsters did step up. Into that breach or relative vacuum, social data has stepped in. We will know within days whether the track record of survey organizations like Pulse Asia will be maintained or whether social data is the measure to watch from now on. Or, in fact, whether a combination of uses may actually be best for the democratic project. That's it for us tonight. Join us again this Friday at 8 p.m. for a special episode of the program. Follow us closely on the campaign trail. because it isn't just elections as usual. This is John Nery. Good night.